From the Daily Catch, this is The Catch Up, and I'm Daily Catch editor Emily Sachar. For nearly 2 years, one of the Hudson Valley's most contentious political battles has centered on a small stretch of waterfront in Red Hook, barely 1/5 of a mile in length. The town's effort to acquire the Red Hook Boat Club through eminent domain has divided neighbors, generated lawsuits, filled town board meetings, and drawn statewide, if not national, attention. Today, in an exclusive interview, we're joined by one of the men who's been at the center of this fight, Red Hook Boat Club Commodore Richie Ross. We'll talk about Ross's background and principles, his leadership under pressure, where that legal battle stands today, what happens next, and how this long fight has changed both the club and the community. It's the week of July 20th. Richie, welcome to The Catch Up.
Emily, thank you for having me. Emily, the Daily Catch. It's a pleasure to be here and share my side of the story and answer some questions that you may have. So thanks for the invite.
I'm so glad you could join us. I know you have a very busy day and you found time for us, so thank you. Richie, before we dive into the boat club discussion itself, tell us a bit about yourself. Where'd you grow up? Where do you live? Tell us about your profession, your family. Fill in those holes for us.
Sure. So Northern Dutchess County has always been home to me, Red Hook specifically. I was raised here, graduated from Red Hook High School, class of 2006. After high school, I went and studied biology, my undergraduate degree at Hartwick College, located in Oneonta, New York. After my undergraduate studies, I went on and pursued a career in dentistry, studying at the University at Buffalo, where I did my 4 years there and a 1-year residency at the Erie County Medical Center after graduation. In 2016 is when I moved back to the Red Hook Rhinebeck area. When I first came back, I was actually bunking up with mom and dad. And they said, "Hey, this isn't going to work out, pal. It's time for you to get out and start on your own." So, at the same time I came back, I was working with my uncle and I purchased a dental practice from Dr. Joel Ritter, wonderful guy. I actually have known him since I was a kid. I went to high school and actually nursery school with his son, Jody. So just a quick little interesting backstory. He called me on a Friday afternoon and said, "Hey, Rich, would you have any interest in purchasing my practice?" And I said, "Joel, I'm really busy. I got a lot of things on my plate." He said, "Well, you know what? Why don't you come down and take a look around? Because it'd be great to see you and catch up and see how things are. Because I haven't seen you since, the high school days, which was 10 years prior." So one thing led to another. I found myself working in 2 different dental practices. COVID came around and I put my focus on the office in Rhinebeck, and it was a great thing that I did that. As far as my personal and family life, I'm married. My wife is Samantha. She's a science teacher at the Rhinebeck Middle School. We have 2 wonderful children. Natalie is 2.5, and Kate, she just turned 5 months yesterday. And I must say they are the pride and joy of my life. Becoming a dad, if you ask me my greatest accomplishment in life, I will hands down say that becoming a father has been the greatest accomplishment of my life. Most recently, I had a conversation with my brother, and he said, he's got a little one at home, and he said to me, "Rich, becoming a parent makes you a better person." And I stopped and thought about that for a minute. And I thought, you're absolutely right. You try to be the best version of yourself for your kids every day, whether it's how you interact with your wife, your friends, your family, but people in the community as well. You're a role model to them. They always look up to you. So becoming a dad has been the greatest accomplishment of my existence to date.
That's so heartfelt and so well said. I can say that's true for being a grandma too. Putting your best foot forward every day. Yeah. And tell our audience, Richie, what is your connection to the boat club? Is it years ago, decades ago?
So my connection, it's part of my family story, I guess, in some ways. So my grandparents actually joined the boat club back. I don't have the exact date. I could look back at, application for membership and tell you the exact date, but it was sometime in the 70s that they joined the boat club. I do know my grandfather passed away in 1984. My grandmother did continue on as a member, and my aunts and uncles have all been members of the boat club. So currently I have 2 uncles and my dad. My parents are both members of the club. My brother is currently on the wait list to become a member. He recently moved back to the area as well, and he's on the waiting list to become a member as well. So it's kind of, like I said, it's been part of my family story. I can remember going there as a kid, learning how to water ski and kneeboard and swim when you're out on the river, and tubing. Picnics, it was like one of those things, hey, let's get on the boat and grab some sandwiches and just go out and have a day on the river. So those are my memories as a kid that evolved to where I am now as Commodore of the organization.
That's so interesting. Tell us how you became Commodore. Was it related to this eminent domain situation, or had you
Not
been
at all.
Commodore prior? Okay. Tell us.
It's kind of an interesting story. It was not a position that I sought out. I'll start with that.
Okay.
The outgoing Commodore, Mr. Robin Rogers, just a prince of a man. He knew my grandparents very well. He had, I think, 5 or 6 children. They all went to Red Hook High School. So I've known him. I've known his family for years. Since I was a kid, I've known the Rogers family. And he approached me. This was back in, I want to say 2020. And he said, Rich, I want you to take the role of Commodore of the Boat Club. And at that point in time, I was busy with work and everything else in life. I said, Mr. Rogers, I don't think I have the time to do it. Why don't you find somebody else? Well, as the saying goes, squeaky wheel gets the grease. He kept asking me to do it. I said, sure. All right. I'll do it for a couple of years, and then I'll pass the torch to somebody else. So a couple of years came and went, and they said, you're doing a great job. Can you do a few more years for us? I said, all right, sure. I'll do a couple more years. And in the period of that couple of years, boom, eminent domain dropped on my lap. And now I'm in it for the long haul. And some of the members jokingly say, you have life tenancy as Commodore of the Boat Club. And that's certainly not true. I'd love to get through this and perhaps pass it on to somebody else. So kind of by, not default, but like I said, squeaky wheel gets the grease. I was, I don't know, handpicked is the right word, but strongly encouraged to assume the role of Commodore of the Red Hook Boat Club.
Great. So tell us a couple things. What exactly does the Commodore do? Forget eminent domain for a minute.
Yes.
Just what are the regular tasks of the
Okay.
Commodore?
Yeah, sure. So like any organization, the Commodore parallels the president. A Commodore is just, I guess, the nautical terminology for the president of an organization. So on the surface, we run meetings and applications for membership, traditions that the boat club does, and fundraising and problems that arise. And I will tell you, there aren't many, but in so many ways, it parallels what the president does of any other organization. So those types of things. So
what does that mean in the case of a boat club? Like, what are the responsibilities for a boat club of being the president?
Well, number one, ensuring safety. I think that's probably one of the most important things with, and anytime you're near water, there's inherent risks and hazards and things of that nature. But, we make sure that all of the bills are paid, taxes, utilities, the boats have to be insured to go in the water. They have to be registered, insured. If there are any issues that arise, what I typically do, I don't like to be the dictator in a situation, but if there aren't many hot topic items, but if there are, I'll call a meeting amongst the entire board and say, hey, what do you guys think about this? What do you recommend? Brainstorm, because I think we've all been in this situation. I know I can at least say that I've been in this situation where perhaps I think I have the best idea on something and there can't be another solution. But you sit down and you talk to people and you realize, wait, my idea kind of stinks. That's a much better idea. I'm glad I sat down and talked with others. So it's just overseeing day-to-day functions, bills, safety, things like that.
And the upkeep and the maintenance, I assume that falls into your lap as well, right?
It does. We're lucky at the boat club. We have committees. We have a docks and bulkhead committee. We have a grounds committee that's responsible for mowing and maintenance of the gardens and sidewalks and paving, things like that. We have a buildings committee for painting, changing light bulbs, leaks in the roof, the stove's not working, things like that. So there are committee heads for each, I guess, responsibility or task within the boat club. And the committee head, the committee chair will come to the board or myself and say, hey, we're going to need some major repairs on our floats next year. Let's start working that into the budget because we do have an annual budget meeting. And if there's any unforeseen expenses, we want to kind of at least try to plan for them ahead of time to the best of our ability. That's the way anything works, Of course, accidents and things happen, but, not accidents, but problems arise. And, you didn't anticipate that. So, okay, what are we going to do with this problem?
Got it. And I assume, Richie, it's an unpaid position.
It is
Ha ha.
unpaid.
Ha ha.
My, my wife will say, you put a lot of time into that. Could you put as much time in at home, But no, I'm passionate about it, with the legacy and the people that are part of the boat club are people that are part of the community. It really is a close-knit, family-oriented feel. So it's worth the time that you put in, it really is. I feel that way strongly.
And how do you feel? It sounds like you really love it, but it's very demanding. What lessons have you learned as president of this boat club, as Commodore?
Lessons I've learned, patience. You have to have patience through a lot of these things, and not just with the eminent domain issue at hand, but just with people. Patience, and you have to have good listening and communication skills. I think that's one of the most important thing. And I would imagine most people that are in any leadership position would agree with me. And communication and listening skills are probably the paramount thing of any organization to really be effective at your job. So I'd say that's one of the biggest things that I've taken away from this.
And do you have, Richie, any kind of mentors or spiritual leaders or guides as you navigate this incredibly complex situation?
So, you know, blessings and there's something good that comes from every unfortunate situation or occurrence. I do believe that. And what do I mean when I say that? I've met some wonderful people through this eminent domain action that I don't know that I would have ever crossed paths with them prior to this. For example, there was a gentleman by the name of Hank Matthews. He was from New Hamburg Yacht Club. Early on when this first surfaced, he was calling me regularly. He was coming to the boat club and advised me. He's since passed away. He passed away this past year, but he was a true leader, someone that knew the water, knew the waterfront, working with the Coast Guard, development and things like that along the Hudson River. He really was an expert, in my opinion. I looked up to him. Other gentlemen I've met along the way, Curtis Stoles, he showed up at several town board meetings. He was at the last one. He usually wears a Navy ball cap and talks about his history. Great guy. And another asset that I've come across was it's a gentleman by the name of Scott Croft. He was the VP of Public Affairs for Boat US. And at the early onset of the eminent domain action, I contacted him. I reached out and I said, Scott, this is our dilemma. Have you seen this before? Do you have any recommendations? And the reason I say he's been my mentor, he says, your situation is not unique. We've seen it. It's less than ideal. But he said, what I suspect is going on with the Red Hook Boat Club, it's similar to like the fire departments where it's the good old boys that are hanging out. Not that that's right or wrong. That's just the way a lot of organizations operate, not just boat clubs, but across the board. He said, what you really need to do is work with your community and show that you're willing to expand usability of the property and boating. And he said to me, and this is what kind of really shaped my opinion and outlook on the eminent domain, as far as willingness to work with the town, because we certainly are. He said, the small boating community is decreasing. When I say small boating, these are your 16 to maybe 22 or 23 foot boats where people go out on the weekend. They're not going out fishing or, it's not your mega yachts. It's the small boating community that goes out with their family to have a lunch on the river or tubing and water skiing. He said, those numbers are going down because the cost of boating is going up. It's expensive to purchase a boat. It's expensive to maintain a boat. It's expensive to put the fuel in the boat. So he said across the nation, the small boating community is going down. And he finished that whole spiel with, if you can increase the small boating community or following within your town, you should stand behind that. And I said, Scott, I agree with you. That is something that I can get behind. So he's been a great mentor as well as Commodores and spokespeople for the Northern Council and our Southern Council that we're affiliated with. The Northern Council is the Mohonk Hudson Council of Yacht Clubs, Northern Council, and the Hudson River Boat and Yacht Club Association is the Southern Council. And that spans from Northern Jersey up through parts of the Erie Canal. In total, don't quote me on the number, it's roughly around 70, 75 different boat clubs, yacht clubs. Some of them are small like us. Other ones down towards the city have your 60, 70-foot yachts with private captains and things like that. But all walks of life that are part of the boating community up and down the Hudson River.
Tell us, if you would, Richie, a little bit about the members of the boat club. How well did you know them before this eminent domain fight began?
So the membership of the boat club, I can tell you prior to it starting, I could name probably 80 to 85 of the people. I knew them by name, 80 to 85 people by name. Since it's all started, I know everybody by name. To tell you exactly, I joined the boat club before I went to dental school. So it was 2010, 2011. But you got to remember, for 6 or 7 years there, I wasn't active because, of course, I wasn't in the area. But, it's a lot of familiar faces. And these people that are part of the club are people from around town, whether it's Tivoli, Red Hook. Yeah, we do have members in Rhinebeck, Germantown, in Mullin, but they're familiar faces. And I do think that the town of Red Hook has tried to portray us as these elitist, unwilling people, which is certainly not true. They are the faces from around town. Yeah, I'm a dentist, but we have people that own their own businesses with example, one gentleman in our club has his own Matco tool distributor. We have mechanics, we have teachers, we have nurses, we have all walks of life. It's not just this elitist group of people that are rich and have all the money in the world. That is probably the furthest thing from the truth. Some of our members work 2 and 3 jobs, and paying the dues for the boat club is a struggle for them, but they're just as passionate about it as I am, because it's a generational legacy that's at stake for them as well. So
It's interesting what you said about elitist, because I have been down to the boat club a number of times now since this took place. And I would say that it's primarily a working class group of people with some additional people who have, like you're saying, kind of white collar, typical, those kinds of jobs. But I wouldn't in any way describe it from what I've seen as elitist. And I'm wondering where do you think that came from, that idea?
that's a good question that I truthfully don't know the answer to. I don't know if that was to kind of shape the story and
Mhm.
the town's way of justifying the action. I really don't know. It's not even fair for me to
Yeah,
speculate on
right.
and make assumptions on what their thoughts were, but I know that's not the truth. And you've been down there. You know these people. You've interviewed them. You've talked to them. You've taken pictures of who they are and heard their life stories. So you know just as much as I do about them. Well, not everybody, but a good handful of them. They're real people.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's get into some of the details of where we stand today. So, where exactly, Richie, is the eminent domain fight right now? There have been the 2 defeats that the town suffered for the State Environmental Quality Review Act before Justice Rosa. Can you just bring us up to date on where that is and what's next in your view for the town's actions on the material actually happening in Red Hook?
Yeah, sure. So let me start off with I'm not a legal expert. I'm certainly getting an education as I go through all this.
Yeah.
For example, the Supreme Court of Dutchess County, when I first heard that name passed around, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, this is the highest it goes. It can't go any higher. Come to find out, the way it's been described to me, and I think for the listeners at home, this may make the most sense of what all these different courts mean. We're in 3 different courts. We're in the Supreme Court of Dutchess County. We're in the Second Appellate Division in Brooklyn, New York, and we also have a federal court case pending in White Plains. And to my understanding, to the best of my knowledge, for an analogy standpoint, the Supreme Court of Dutchess County is like your JV sports. The Second Appellate Division is like your varsity sports. And then the federal courts are like your pros. So what does this all mean? It's very difficult to get a case into the federal courts, the pros. It's very difficult to become a professional athlete. It's even harder to stay there as time goes on. So we've been successful in presenting a case in front of the federal courts, and we've been successful in keeping our complaint in the federal courts. So right now in the Supreme Court of Dutchess County, Justice Maria Rosa, yes, she did annul 2 of the local amendments to the zoning laws. The Second Appellate Division. My understanding is that the Second Appellate is perhaps one of the slowest courts in New York State. And I don't know what slow means. I don't know if a year is slow, 2 years or 3 years is slow, but I know you don't receive answers as quick as you do as like we got from Justice Maria Rosa. As far as the federal courts go, we're working towards right now, I think, a court date. We just had to do some depositions recently, which is like the homework or, the question and answer prior to going to trial, just to kind of weed out some of the, I don't know, the non-pertinent information, if you will, so that the trial is not dragged out for forever. So 3 different courts. We do not have a determination in the Second Appellate, and that's the home of the eminent domain. That is like the heart and soul of where this whole thing lies at this point in time. When we received an answer, I truthfully don't know. Could be a year,
So-
could be 2 years.
So their decision, thinking about the appellate division, their decision is, can the town of Red Hook take the boat club by an eminent domain? Is that correct?
That
That's
is
what they're
correct.
deciding. They're not
Correct.
looking at whether the environmental reviews are correct or any of that. They're just, can the Red Hook Boat Club be taken in this way? So they're looking at questions like, is there an urgent need in the town? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. But they do look at environment. And as far as eminent domain goes, Seeker, State Environmental Quality Review Act, it's a big part of eminent domain. It's a requirement that they do Seeker, the hard look that Justice Rosa, cited in the First Amendment to zoning laws. So no, they'll look at everything. They certainly will. And it's my understanding that her ruling from the Article 78 get forwarded to the Second Appellate Division, and they review everything, big picture. I mean, eminent domain it's a force. It's a force. I mean, typically it's used for bridges, roadways, infrastructure, utilities, widening of sidewalks. Although it can be used, yes, it's clearly defined as being used to create public parks. But, have they done their homework? Have they looked at, surface runoff, waste, handicap accessibility, safety? How does it affect the value of adjacent homes? Everything. There's a list that goes on and on and on that, I think an attorney could give you a very accurate description of what they're looking at in Seeker. But these are just some of the things that I'm familiar with.
Okay. So we're waiting to see whether the town appeals the decisions at that lower court that you mentioned, right? If they don't appeal it, we're waiting to see what they do, whether they try to rezone and do that harder look at seeker. So that's at the lower court. At the appellate division, we're waiting to see if they decide whether eminent domain can go ahead at the boat with the boat club. And then we have the civil rights case, correct, at the federal
That's
level.
correct. That is correct.
A lot going on, a lot to keep track of.
It is.
Yeah. Last week, Richie, the two newest Red Hook town board members, Christina Ducharme and Ken Migliorelli, pushed to try to get the town board to reverse course on eminent domain. They had hoped, it seems, to harness 3 votes in total, theirs and perhaps one other, maybe Jacob Testa, but they were not successful. And I wondered how you felt, and were you surprised?
Well, I think first things first, it's important to point out, I give Christina and Kenny a lot of credit for trying to, one, rescind the vote, 2, put it up for a permissive referendum, which is a town vote, a public vote. I'm grateful for that. So I do want to say thank you to them. As far as the outcome, it's disappointing. I mean, Emily, you're the editor of the Daily Catch. You see a lot of the comments that are coming in. I do recognize that no one's going to come to me and say, Rich, I support eminent domain. No one's going to come to me and say that, but I'm pretty good at reading between the lines and seeing everything that's out there, both locally and abroad. And I'm not seeing a lot of support for the action. I think there's something that's important to point out. Would it be great to have a town park, a public park? Sure. But eminent domain is a very powerful tool. And the concern looking ahead is misuse of eminent domain. If town of Red Hook versus the Red Hook Boat Club is successful here, it truly does leave all private landowners vulnerable to government wants. Let's say the farmer out in Syracuse, New York, that overlooks the lake. The local government out there says, you know what, that'd be a great place to turn into a town park. All we have to do, reference the town of Red Hook versus the Red Hook Boat Club. start the process of eminent domain, and we can pretty much, get that property, which, like I said, I think it sets a very bad precedent. And that's really what I feel like I'm fighting for. Yes, it's the boat club, but it's also the rights of private landowners. Since this started, I've received phone calls and emails from people down to Long Island and out to Buffalo. And it's not because they caught wind of the case, it's because they have family and friends in the area. And they say, Rich, don't take this the wrong way. It's that not that I don't care about your boat club, because I do, but what I really care about is the rights of private landowners here. And eminent domain procedure law is governed by state law. I don't know if you know much about the Kelo versus New London case.
No, I
An
don't.
interesting,
Tell us about that.
yeah, it's an interesting one for the listeners and readers at home to check out. So, City of New London in Connecticut, and I don't remember the exact dates. It might have been 2007, 2009 time period. There's a movie out there called The Little Pink House if you want to watch a movie on it, but you can do a 20-minute read and get the same story. But anyway, there was a lady, her name was Mrs. Kelo. She owned this little pink house in New London, Connecticut, and the city of New London wanted to remove, using the process of eminent domain, a little development within the city of New London to provide for Pfizer, pharmaceutical plant, right on the river. And what happened, they were successful. Supreme Court of the United States voted 5-4, I want to say, to move ahead with eminent domain. They did. They wiped out this little neighborhood, this city block. And soon after demolishing all the structures there, Pfizer pulled out and said, we're not going to build here. Sorry, we're moving on to something else. And as a result of that, a lot of states amended the requirements, and from a legal standpoint, what you're able to do, what towns were able to do with eminent domain. New York was a state that did not. It kind of left it up to local government. So it'll be interesting to see what comes as a result of all this. If lawmakers up in Albany will take a look and not allow as much leeway with the use of eminent domain.
Richie, I know we're already starting to see signs around town, things like McKeon for dog catcher or no kings defeat McKeon. He will be up for reelection in November of 2027, so it's roughly 15 months from now. We don't know yet whether he'll decide to run, and so will Bill Hammoud, the deputy supervisor, and Jacob Testa, who I mentioned a minute ago. Those three right now are holding the majority of cards in support of the eminent domain action. Does the boat club intend to actively work to elect a different slate of candidates next fall? Tell us about that.
So I try to say this to our membership. We really should remain nonpartisan, because we do have members of all ends of the political spectrum. We really do, and I genuinely mean that. So I think it's most important going forward to look at the value of the candidates and what they stand for. Not to get into national politics, but I feel like as a country, we've become so polarized and it's infiltrated local politics. I think the most important thing to do is look at the value of the character who's running for office. Set aside the Democrat Republican, like, who is this person? What do they believe in? What are their values? To me, that is the most important thing, to be perfectly honest with you. Historically, like these little town governments, I truly believe it was people that cared about their community. And I know everybody runs on the platform they do, but I think on a larger scale, we're influenced by things that are going on in the national level. But locally, let's look at the value and who these people are. What do they believe in? What do they stand for? I put, emphasis on that. I really do.
So I hear you there, Richie, but I know that last year, for example, when we had the Democratic caucus, a number of boat club members switched their party allegiance to be able to vote in the caucus, really echoing a lot of what you're saying, that it's not about Democrat or Republican, it's about, I want to have a vote. So coming back to my question, and yes, I hear you on ethics and I hear you on values, but where does the boat club come out with thinking about McKeon continuing on as supervisor or Bill Hammoud continuing on as deputy supervisor? Are you truly agnostic on this?
No, I think, if we asked any members, we probably would give all efforts to see that they are not reelected, just because how they've dragged not only the boat club, but, everybody within the community through the mud. I mean, this isn't a good look. This isn't a good name for Red Hook. And if this is, one of their actions and they're doubling down on this whole action, to me, I don't see them as leaders and role models for Red Hook. So yeah, I think it's fair to say that, not only the boat club members, but most people around town would advocate against, reelecting any three of those town council members at this point. I know I certainly am not going to be a supporter of them.
Yeah. So what does that look like for you and your organization if you want to see them defeated, if they should choose to run again? Does it mean you put up candidates from the boat club? Does it mean you get out and campaign against them? What does it look like?
I think that's a great question, by the way, Emily. I think it's important, that even starting now, is to start polling the people and get the word out that we're looking for new candidates for run for town board and town supervisor, and really get down to the nitty gritty of it. What are your values? And it can't just be the boat club. I know that, in some ways, Ken and Christina ran on that platform. They're anti-eminent domain. And of course, most people around town are, but that can be a starting question. But we got to get out there and find candidates that are really going to, advocate for the boat club, but also Red Hook as a whole. There's a lot of different projects that are going on. We're working on a new comprehensive plan, and there's a lot going on. So I think looking for new candidates, and seeing and hoping that they get the nomination over perhaps one of the ones that are currently seated would be ideal. Yeah.
Mhm. So that's something that you see the boat club helping to lead, helping to spearhead.
Sure. I mean, we're looking for communication. I mentioned that's important. Communication, transparency, accountability for those elected to local office. I mean, they claim that they're the most transparent board, but court rulings are showing, and documents that are coming out at this point in time are refuting that claim. I mean,
Mhm.
it's the proof is in the pudding at this point.
I'm glad you raised the issue of communication, Richie, because I know one thing that's baffled me and that I still have really not gotten a clear answer on is that we've heard from McKeon, I'm sure you have, that he has repeatedly tried to reach out to the boat club to have conversations about a public-private partnership. Has that really happened? Has there really been a reach out from McKeon or from his staff? And what has happened with that?
On my end of things, that's an incorrect statement. I know if you asked him, he'd say contrary to that. But I reflect back to my first communication with him. Now, keep in mind, the town started the action. The town's law firm called the Boat Club's law firm on March 31st, 2025. And I know that as an exact date because it was the day after my daughter's birthday. So March 31st, 2025. They had the public hearing on May 15th, 2025. My first active communication with Town Supervisor Robert McKeon came in June. That was the first time that I received an email from him. And basically, the email stated something along the lines of, we want to work with you, but come up with a plan. So from our standpoint, we're looking at it saying, wait a second, you're the aggressor in this situation. And now you want us to come up with a plan or proposal that's to your liking, and the bit of communication that I have had with him, and we went through some mediation back in December and January, the town is fixated on title and ownership of the property. And that's our red line. I mean, we don't want to back away from that, but we are certainly open, will entertain the idea of increasing public access. I mean, again, as I mentioned earlier, that came directly from Scott Croft, Boat US. We're not opposed to that. What that looks like, I don't know. I think that's something, what I'd like to see happen is the town board of Red Hook and the board of directors from the boat club sit down and, hey, let's talk about the shortcomings. How can we improve this? Is it, on the weekend, one weekend a month, 2 weekends a month? I don't know, but you have to be very careful because it's an environmentally sensitive location. It's small. It's 2.37 acres. There is limited parking. There's limited turnaround for boat, truck and trailer. And it's a difficult area to maneuver around as far as launching boats and things like that. If you go to local launches like Rhinecilff, Rhinecliff's a little bit, it is tight to turn around, but they have a nice gradual ramp down and approach to the water. But if you compare it to Norrie Point and places like Germantown, they're beautiful locations to maneuver truck, trailer, vehicles around. We don't have that. That's not to say that we can't help out and do something to make it easier, but those are things that have to be considered.
Absolutely. So it sounds like what you're saying is there have been some discussions. I think some of the things you're talking about we have reported, but you don't feel that there's anything that's really moved the needle forward, or
No,
no proposal that's been really genuine about public-private partnership.
there hasn't. Again, real heartfelt communication, it hasn't been there. And in our defense, as I mentioned before, the town's the aggressor, and this is a very crude way of describing the situation, and I recognize that. So bear that in mind. But it's like, hold me at gunpoint and say, do this or else, like either, come to our terms or we're just going to push forward with eminent domain. Before we received the call on March 31st that the town was starting eminent domain, there was no communication or genuine effort to work things out. It should have come then. The town board of Red Hook should have said, we want to sit down with you and we want to increase access to the river for the residents of Red Hook and Tivoli. That did not happen. It was more or less forced. And at town board meetings, Robert would say, well, we want to come up with a resolution and a solution to the problem, but there was never anything in writing, not until June. And that's been the most disheartening thing for me, to be honest with you, and how it's just progressed through the legal system and, Judge Rose's rulings and the town basically saying, we disagree with you. You're wrong. We're just going to appeal your ruling. By the way, if they do file it, I don't know if they're going to, we'll go to the Second Appellate Division. So, we go back to the waiting game, and it doesn't just, jump to the front of the line. It has to go through the proper channels to make it onto the judge's desk. So communication, again, I think that's the biggest thing. There wasn't any. Is it because there's an ulterior motive at play? I don't know. I don't think there was an ulterior motive from the start. I didn't feel that way when there was the possible rescinding the vote and then putting it up for permissive referendum last Tuesday. I did start to question more. Am I missing something here? Like what's the bigger picture? Is there something else at play that I'm not aware of? I never had that feeling until a week ago.
Yeah. Richie, if you were in a room with Robert McKeon, no media, no cameras, just the two of you, what would you say to him?
Knock it off. I'd say knock it off. And I'd say, look how just hurtful this is to this community. At one point, somebody said, I think it was Sarah Bowden said, this is damaging to the fabric of this community. It really is. When you see what's going on, and some of the comments online that people say to each other is like, oof, gosh, those are nasty words. But eminent domain is nasty. I would truly say to him, Robert, just stop the action. I'm willing. The boat club is willing to have genuine dialogue with you and come up with some resolution to this problem. We wholeheartedly are, but you can't hold us captive, to eminent domain and say, do it or else I'm going to take it anyway. That's not conducive to effective communication and a good, reasonable outcome, So I think that's what I would honestly say to him,
Well, and you've also said that in public, so that's not anything terribly new. So I guess what you're saying is everything you've wanted to say to him, you've said to him.
I have.
Truth be told. So, Richie, let's put you in your 70s, which I guess you're in your 30s now. Let's take you 30, 35 years from now. How do you think you'll feel when you look back on this chapter of Red Hook's history, your personal history, your boat club's history?
I would think to myself, I'm glad that I stood up for what I believe in. We were able to maintain the boat club, perhaps increase public access to the river. And I think this is for anybody. If there's something you truly believe in, fight for it. Fight for it. It's worth it. It's trying at times, but the good things in life, sometimes you do have to fight for. And I think that's how I'd look back at it and vision this experience. I do think we'll be successful. What else, Emily? I don't know. I rehearse so many different things in my head. I get emotional about this. I really do, just because it's a home away from home, and the people that are down there are, like I said, they're real people. They're like second family to me. So I think I'd look back and say, I'm glad I stood up for what I believe in.
Okay. Well, thank you so, so much, Richie, for coming on the show. We're so glad you found the time for us.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you for inviting me on, Emily. It's been a pleasure. And, thanks for all the hard work you're doing with the boat club and everything else around town. I think you put your heart and soul into it, and it shows. And the people that I talk to are appreciative of the Daily Catch. So kudos to you as well.
Oh, thank you so much. It's great to be recognized by someone who's putting in at least as much work as I am. So thank you. Well, thanks to Matty Rosenberg, Jen Hammoud, and Esther Martell at our partner, Radio Free Rhinecilff, for their help in producing this episode. And we'll see you next time, perhaps on the Hudson River.
Take care.